As Dr. Keith Blevins wrote, our emotions, our desires, habits, insecurity, patterns of behavior, personality traits are all the byproducts of mind, consciousness, and thought. One could say they are the very foundation and the building blocks of all psychological behavior and thinking. And without these principles, we'd be devoid of our five senses. And without our five senses, to us, reality wouldn't exist. Hey, social media, it's Stephen Middleton coming to you from the Possibility Action Network. Our values include I am, I can, and I will. I am Possibility Man. Today, I want to share on the theme, the consciousness of belief. But first, I want to offer this reminder. The Possibility Action Network will be migrating away from my personal Facebook page to the Possibility Action Network Facebook page. We're doing this because mainly my family, some friends and acquaintances are connected to me on my personal Facebook page, and I want to offer Facebook Lives to a community of individuals who understand what my interests are and who are interested in plugging into me around the subjects of optimal physical health, emotional wellness, and also financial fitness. And I think I'll be able to do this better, more effectively, on my private page where people understand these are the kinds of things that I want to talk about. Also, beginning on Tuesday next week at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, the Possibility Action Network will be launching its Possibility Action Hour with me as your host, Stephen Middleton, Possibility Man. So 7 o'clock next Tuesday, Eastern Time, we'll start with our first Possibility Action Hour. Now, to get my information, you'll have to send me an email to iampossibilityman@gmail.com. Once again, send an email to iampossibilityman, and I'll send you my Zoom login information. I will not post it on Facebook Live, but of course, because there are hackers out there and all kinds of things that may happen out there in the world. Now, back to our theme, the consciousness of belief. Now, why am I having this conversation about the consciousness of belief? Well, earlier today, this morning, I had a talk with a man he's almost 48 years of age. And as we talked about things that matter, I asked him, what stops you from pursuing your dreams? What stops you from pursuing your goals? And he had an immediate response. He said, the fear of losing, the fear of failing. So I thought, something, I'm going to speak about this today. I will not mention your name, I told him, but I want to talk about this, and I also want to offer a cure to this malady called the fear of losing and the fear of failing. What is the cure? Just try. That's it. Just try. And I'll remind you of this cure as we continue our conversation and before we sign off for today. Now, everything that I share with you today about the consciousness of belief is inspired by Sydney Banks. I've mentioned him before. He was born in 1931 in Scotland, and he migrated to Canada and ended up on the west coast of that country. In 1973, he had an experience that really changed his life. He said he understood the nature of life. He said he understood the principles behind all life. And he shared those principles as mind, consciousness, and thought. One of his students was Dr. Keith Blevins, and he's the individual I quoted as we began this Facebook Live today. So Sydney Banks then identified 3 principles behind all life. And once again, they are mind, consciousness, and thought that govern the human experience. Everything in our world, everything that appears in our world, in the past or in the years to come, are all governed by these 3 principles. Today, then, I want to isolate one of these principles, and that is the principle of consciousness. Now, what does this mean? What does consciousness mean? Well, consciousness is that invisible knowing that exists in every being on the planet, and perhaps even in the plants. I don't know that to be true, but it's possible that the plants also have consciousness. Every human creature has consciousness. Every animal has consciousness. Consciousness is this knowing about everything that exists in our world, in our space. For example, then, let's make this very simple. When you got up this morning, more likely than not, you walked over to the light switch in your bedroom and you hit the switch up. You had this knowing, this consciousness that your light would come on the moment you hit switch up. Also, another simplistic understanding of this is when you got out of bed this morning and your feet, of course, under situations that are right for you. Everyone cannot just get out of bed. I'm aware of that. But for most people, when your feet hit the floor, you had this consciousness, this knowing that you could stand and that you could walk toward that light switch. That's consciousness. Every athlete, let's take a basketball player that's dribbling the ball down the court and stops and throws up this ball toward the hoop. Those athletes who have this higher consciousness of knowing that that basketball has a good chance of falling into the ring that's on this pole in that arena are individuals who are in touch with this consciousness, with this knowing. And that's what I want to talk about now, is that we all have this consciousness, this knowing, like flicking a white light switch, like turning the ignition on in our car, like taking our first step. This consciousness of knowing exists in everything. Everything is consciousness. Everything is this invisible power behind all life. Everything is this knowing behind all life. Everything, then, we could say, is a lot like it is our God, our higher self, our being is consciousness. When we say, I can, that's consciousness. Because without consciousness, we cannot say that I can. When we say, I cannot, that's also consciousness. We get to choose whether we can or whether we can't, because we cannot get away from consciousness. So what then is the implication of all of this? I love it, because what this implies is that we can attract a lot of things into our experience that we actually want. Let's start with our children, for example. Many of us often say, we want our children to do better on standardized tests. Well, that's easy. Let's simply work with them in a way that gets them to see that whether they feel they can or not, or whether they feel that they cannot, is all a matter of consciousness. Now, I'm not trying to be woo-woo here. I'm not simply saying just leave it all to God. I am saying we can take decisive action, especially with what we know now about, webinars, about Zoom, about Facebook. We can do anything that we want. Our children simply happens to be one of my passions, but you may have other passions. You may have other things that you're concerned about, that you're eager to get involved with. And this is why the Possibility Action Network exists. And I am calling individuals who are, struck with this notion that there are things that they want to do while they are in this body. Let's associate with each other. Let's build a community of trust. And let's see what we can produce in our world. I am also interested in optimal physical health. Now, you've heard me say before, I live with muscular dystrophy. This is a debilitating condition. So therefore, health is very important to me. I want to maintain vital, optimal health, physical health, for as long as I possibly can. And I'm calling like-minded individuals who want to produce the best health that they can produce in their bodies, no matter where they are in the stage of life. I'm also concerned about individuals enjoying emotional wellness, emotional health, a subject that we rarely talk about in our society today. But it's important for an individual to be happy, to feel healthy, to feel vibrant, to know that they're also filled with emotional health. I am interested in individuals achieving financial fitness. Look, we're in the 21st century. There's no such thing as I don't have money. Money is in abundance everywhere in the world. And I want to participate in this conversation with people worldwide who want to discover their capacity to achieve financial fitness. All of this is consciousness. Belief is consciousness. There's no way that I can even talk about belief without recognizing that belief really comes from God. I can't. Comes from God too. But we get to choose which of this that we want to choose. I want to share with you an experience I had after finishing up my Doctor of Philosophy degree. I don't talk about this very often. Back in 1987, I landed a job a couple of years later, in fact, 2 years later, at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. In North Carolina State University, it's a big-time university, and they expected their faculty to publish books. Now, here I am, a young man with a PhD in hand, had been in school for 11 consecutive years, and here I was faced with writing a book. And I tell you what, my first thought was, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I could do this now. Of course, I had written my dissertation. My dissertation was published as a book later, but I was stricken with this fear of having to write books as a university professor. And I distinctly remember walking into the library on the campus of North Carolina State University. And what arose into my consciousness was a book that was in my vision. And the word that I got back from heaven was, you can write a book like that. That consciousness was the consciousness, I can write this book, was the consciousness of God, was the consciousness of the all, was the consciousness, if you prefer to say, of Jehovah, or the consciousness of Allah. Whichever works for you, that consciousness is in the world. And that's what I want to share on social media. And that's what I want to share in the Possibility Action Network Hour. And those are the kinds of things I want to share when we launch our podcast. We want to talk about possibility, and I believe that it's possible. As we close this live today, then, I want to remind you that as I talked with that young man this morning, not a young man, almost 50 years of age, he said what held him back was the fear of losing. And I say to you, that fear was consciousness. He said what held him back was the fear of failing. That fear, yes, was also consciousness. Because without consciousness, without life, without God, he would have no knowledge of whether he would fail, or whether he could actually lose. Well, there's the cure, as I said earlier. What is this cure for the fear of losing? What is this cure for the fear of failing? Just try. And just try is also consciousness. Because knowing that you can try has to come from the invisible, and the invisible is consciousness. I'm Stephen Middleton. I'm with the Possibility Action Network. Our values include I am, I can, and I will. And I am Possibility Man. Until next time, good day.